10 seconds. Hello, dogs. Welcome to Virtual Fridays Dire Literary Series. My name is Timothy Gager, and today we've got a duo and special guests of Christopher Shipman and Vincent Cellucci, who have written a book together called Getting Away with Everything. And let me show you this book really quick. Here we go. And there it is. So this is at bookshop.org. And as you can see, the description is the bad boys of poetry are back. So this is fantastic. Vincent, and they've written together. This is their second book together. Vincent wrote Absence Like Sun on his own and An Easy Place to Die. He edited Fuck Poems, and that is not just Fuck Poems, it's that one. And an anthology on Lavender Ink. He has two collaborative titles. I'll just put this up there. You can read it on your own, but these guys are Southern dudes. Christopher Shipman is the author of the movie My Murderer Makes, Season 2, the Cupboard, co-author of Super Poems 2, and co-author of Keats Is Not the Problem. His work appears in journals, as you can see here, and there's some very, very fine journals. So, and Chris lives in Greensboro, North Carolina, while Vincent lives in Louisiana. So,
actually, I'm in the Netherlands now, Timothy. But my heart is always in Louisiana.
All right. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Christopher and Vincent.
Great. Thank you very much, Timothy.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
I think Chris is going to lead us off here, but we're going to alternate.
Yeah, thanks, Timothy, for hosting us, and thanks for coming, friends, for coming. I'm going to start by just reading the first poem. The beginning seems like a good place to begin. And this poem has an epigraph that I will read from Richie Blink. The poem is called Solastalgia. We would come out of the floodgates and my dad would say, "Head for the lemon trees." The older folks always discouraged us from going out of respect. The legend goes that you were always to bring some kind of sacrifice, so somebody left some lemons for the ancestors. But now that it's washing away, it needs to be seen before it gets lost. Richie Blink from Louisiana's disappearing coast takes ancient history with it. It's easy to imagine Richie Blink on the radio, unblinking when he can'ts, opening words like floodgates or my dad. And when he says, say, then lemon trees, something as simple as going really goes. It's even easier to conjure the young ones, squinting at the sun, soliciting spirits alive in the blood the old folk left, when he says respect or sacrifice. But when legend slips out of his mouth, it sounds like ancestor, like washed away, like lost. I say, selfishly, before the final island disappears, let's tell a story, every story of home that lives in the static on every station. Let's get away with everything while we're still slow in the process of disappearing. Let's head for the lemon trees. Pluck the fruit, pluck yesterday, pluck ancient history, pluck today. In that distance, the past glistens, a floating house shaping its own shore. The way an open letter tucked in a drawer in a previous life wants another tongue. Yesterday's splintered limbs say, don't let this be the last memory of me. Head for the trees, make an offering. If the waves lap at the door, let us swim. If the sky is never finished, nothing is.
Ghosts in tow. I got a steam burn making tropical tea for nobody and me. Same doom, different poem. I want to leave too, how she stormed off to her room, how we storm home. Getting drunk's still fun, so's gravity. Stay alive, look alive, on the ball court or empty lot. It's a turtle eat, turtle fuck terrarium out there in here. Kevlar shell breast. However, remember, follow snakes, stay wild, get away, giddy up, get away alive, all night, alerts, let her riff. Nobody knows my troublesome names like you see. My ex called me a Lodi fairy, and well, I usually do pack a little heat and peat, offerings for those that don't get to hoot for the undergod that takes it all away, that may tap into truth, but I don't hold on to shit, putting ice cubes in my Vuv click, eating stuffed crust on a virtual porch. No one has to shovel the bottles off of tomorrow. Shippy and I wrote a lot of these poems on porches.
Time travel. 2 hours to the mountains, 4 to the sea. That's what people who knew North Carolina kept saying about Greensboro. The move from New Orleans was a number of hours, hard to recall. For a haul that long, you can't count time, but space. Hours replaced with miles. Around 800, give or take. It was a hotel halfway, just past Atlanta. A 15-foot U-Haul with hatchback in tow. It was walkie-talkies, a finger on talk. It was worry for the woman and kid out in front, barely cresting every hill in our dying Nissan. I never let them escape my sight, my square of windshield like a rented world. But they always felt far away. Maybe moving anywhere would feel far away after 12 years in Louisiana. After Mardi Gras masquerading as rain and wind, after king cakes, sin, and saints splayed on every table. After the birth of a kid, a near divorce, what people call beginning again. On the road, I remembered how in grad school in Baton Rouge, when I'd go home to Arkansas, it was always, as they say, everything seemed small, but smaller than that, like I could never go back. Because the moment I left the place, it had already gone, disappeared into dream. I knew then I'd surrender sleep to remember waking. Now we're waking up in Greensboro. We had to get used to the hour difference, but that didn't take long. We're looking forward to the mountains. And when we're ready for the 4-hour trek to walk along the beach, all our exhausted ghosts in tow, pretending to be innocent shadows.
Porch sharks. Your lives leap from your lines, spring from staying put on a porch. Junky like littered like a beatniks, all skags and mugs, which would make me feel at home in Greensboro, because let's face it, we fled. I'll jam the butt of any inquiry into an improvised ashtray, maybe a cloudy piece of Tupperware left out for a few days to feed another unlikely stray like it fed me many times before. Even vagrants can stay put too many years. Louisiana permanence, as if grasping for everything that slithered further away than the magic hand of chance medley. Staying put is a subtle mind fuck to master. Inside the self, outside, ever land. There's a shipwrecked sun searching the wake endlessly for shark teeth, singing.
This morning, even the porch swing was a ghost, touched perhaps by a light current of wind sweeping down from the foothills, common here in late summer, but also as if it was still telling the story of the night before, trying to find the right words to finish a last sentence. He came outside and found himself there in the little square of sun splashed on the brick wall just beyond the swing. The mess of his hair, the shadow of the familiar monster. It felt something like a dream, like he was there and not there. One part of him had driven out to the coast the night before, set out in a solitary dinghy to brave rocking waves, and never made it back. Another part stayed put on the porch, spent the entire night watching the swing sway. By the time he saw the swing, he'd already decided waking is like being dead if the house and other inhabitants, except the cats cooing for food, are still tucked away. But then a little girl appeared at the door, her sleepy face pressed against the glass, her hair a mess like his, and her mother behind her, coffee in hand, a ready weapon, eager to deliver last night's dream. She'd gone back, she said, yet again to her grandfather's house, to carve out the valuables from the ghosts that own them, place them gently into living hands. So she walked to the garage, brought back 2 rubber alligators, folded them into lassos, swung wildly in the air, which whipped. He understood the desire to perform such a gesture, rather than finish any sentence and wake forever from that dream. I'll turn it over to you, Vincent, to end it for us.
Excuse me?
I said that's the last one I was going to read, so I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. I have a little multimedia experiment more than even an experience that I wanted to try out tonight. So thank you for bearing with me on this. It's my screen actually being shared. All this fancy technology, PowerPoint. Is that coming through?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I've been playing around with some technology at my gig in the TU Delft library, and there's some interesting things now that are basically AI. You can put in words clusters and searches, and then it sort of generates images that the artificial intelligence thinks is pertinent or telling. So I sort of wanted to create a little video poem out of this, but at this moment it's more of a manual slideshow. So in progress. My blur flew from puddle to puddle. I am still slow in the process of disappearing. Some folks have tape recorders. I have, oh, I'm so sorry. I need to start over again. This is the wrong one. Wrong one. Okay, I'm on the right one now. Sorry about that. I am still slow in the process of disappearing. Some folks have tape recorders. I have blur and a ship's memory. A more reliable, fallible. A rebel. I'm very behind. A rebel with so much heart. See, I don't recall the sight, just the ritual, nor the sentence, just the sentiment. All toxin, confetti, absurd trivia of my specter, 3 blue hearts of an octopus. Sure, maybe I want more nothings. An ink cannibal, but I made friends, currents lifting me from trench to trench. Thank you.
That was really cool.
That was really cool.
I was a little bit behind at the beginning. Sorry about that.
Oh, that was great.
All
I'm
right.
sure that's not an easy thing to navigate.
Yeah, that's great stuff. So yeah, it's wonderful to hear you guys together. So in your book, are you the book that's out now? Do you write the poems individually, or do you write some of them together, or both?
Uh, yeah. For this book, we wrote them pretty much individually, but we're also sort of riffing on each other in the poems. I don't know if you could hear Vince read a line in that last poem that he read that was a line that I read in the first poem. So some of the lines sort of get recycled and repurposed. So in that sense, we are writing them together in terms of, I guess, in some ways stealing from each other, and just using them as sort of launching points, or really sort of at the heart, the heart's core of whatever poem we might have been writing at the time. But for the most part, we are writing them individually.
But you're sharing them with each other fairly often.
Ed, I need to monitor this, otherwise it becomes a free for all. Please put your questions in the chat. Okay. Thanks very much. I hate those free for alls, man.
Yeah.
It's like pulling
That's
out.
okay. Yeah, we were
Thank you,
sharing we had a Google Doc essentially, looking at it all the time, and moving things around, and Vince, I don't know if you want to say anything.
Yeah, no, I was just so Shippy and I we've always been really good friends, but we've also been a little bit competitive. So our first competitive about verse, let's say. So our first book was about Battleship, and so we had this little bit of concept of this game. As boys, we both loved the game Battleship, and so we decided to try to translate that into poetry, and trying to come up with each other's lines to sort of sync each other. And so that was the first book, A Ship on the Line. And then we sort of developed a nice workflow on Google Docs, where basically it became kind of a correspondence. And so Chris gets up a lot earlier than I do. So he writes a poem in the morning, and then by the time I get up in the afternoon, I write a poem in response to his poem. So in that respect, it's very fresh, Ed, and really responding to the last thing that they wrote. And then what was kind of funny is that I moved across to Europe, and then so the time difference switched. So now it's the other way around. I wake up, Shippy writes the poem after I write it. So that was kind of a nice inversion for this book.
So can one of you tell me how you became aware of each other and each other's work? And you can both answer, why did you want to work together?
Well, I mean, we met in grad school. Vince was a second year when I started my MFA at LSU in Baton Rouge. So we met and pretty much, I mean, I don't know, like became pretty fast friends. And we would go to the river and sit on the Big B of Baton Rouge and the bank of the river downtown Baton Rouge, and sort of challenge each other and other friends.
After the all the bars closed and kicked us out. So
right after we were kicked out of everywhere else, we would go to the river and challenge each other and other friends who were with us to just best line about the river, in that moment. So it seemed like we were on a reading tour together that included Atlanta, North Carolina, South Carolina. I don't know. I don't even remember exactly. But I think it was on that reading tour, wasn't it? Where we were like, hey, we have to do this. Like we just in traveling came up with an idea for collaboration. And it was, I think it was one of those things that was inevitable. Eventually it was going to happen. And that was the moment when we were together, focused on traveling for readings, where it all just kind of fell into place.
Yeah, and I would say that's like the very physical, practical side of it all. But I think from like a poetic side, we're really close friends on the personal and practical side. But on poetic side, we sort of come at it from a little bit different streams. I sort of have a little bit more of like a language sound, thing, and Chris comes from a little bit more of a narrative, talk bent, and so we've kind of met each other in interesting ways, and I think push each other into each other's styles somewhat, and we've tried onto each other's voices, and that's been really freeing. So we sort of get to masquerade as each other, and the fact that we publish it by double authors and no distinguishing of which poems which, really, I found that a very freeing experience, and so I think Chris has as well. So yeah, we like this form of working.
So Chris, I want you to answer this question about Vincent. This is like a game show. Vincent, I'd like to have you answer this question about Chris. This is your second book together. So could you tell us what has changed? What have you noticed has changed in each other's work in terms of craft, maybe subject? What has happened in between? What have you noticed about each other's work?
Do you want to start, Vince, or you want me to?
He said he was going to ask you first.
Okay.
Don't fight over it, guys.
Okay, all right.
That's a great question.
I think that Vince just said a second ago that he is I think definitely more interested generally in sound, and that and language, play than I have been generally. And I've noticed, I think it is partly like he was saying, because of us working so much together and sort of feeding off each other and trying on each other's voices. I really love that way of putting it. I think that my work has like sort of come, they've like kind of collapsed a little bit, and you can definitely see that on in some of the poems. Like he said, there's no distinguishing marker necessarily between each of our poems, but some of them, even for me, when I go back and look at them, I'm like, all right, did I write that? So sometimes it gets very blurry. So I think that one of the things that's happened as we've worked together, and just like by the nature of writing for decades, there are things that change, and I think you have to do all of the things, like you do all of the things and you feel what works out. But I think working with someone very closely, like you do sort of like I think my work has like sort of become more like Vince's, and I think Vince's work has become more like mine.
I'd say that, and also I think our forgivingness with each other, like, I don't know, at one point, we would really sort of be combative about a revision that the other imposed on the other or something, and like now it's like free reign, like just mess with my work as much as you want, and I trust, like that's actually like part of the obstacle of editing. It's like it's like an obstruction of sorts, and so it's taken a long time to get to that trust, even as close friends. But I think now it's like, I mean, if Chris puts a suggestion on that Google document, I accept it, and I do not think twice about it. And so that's comes with working with someone for a long time. And I would say, jokingly, but also true, that the reverse applies for Chris. So, he wasn't the first person to accept every one of my changes in the beginning, but now he trusts me enough to accept all my changes, I think. So
yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah, well, beyond the revision, I mean, you have a book together. Were there poems that you wanted to advocate for that your partner did not want in, and how did you work those out? Did you just say that's fine? Was it pretty easy at this point?
Yeah, well, life circumstances, it's funny because I think that's the other beautiful thing of writing with a collaborator, and I would just, if anything, I would just say that this is the coolest way to work, and I hope that other poets find as much joy and sort of helpfulness in writing with a colleague is that I found in this relationship, because when I'm too busy and stressed out with work, Shippy kind of takes the lead of the project and pushes it forward. And when he's stressed out with this and that, and then I can push it forward. So I think for the generative writing phase of the manuscript, I was really pushing, but then towards the editing and finalizing and ordering, Chris was really leading this, and it was just beautiful to have that trust and to have a partner really to kind of pass the baton and keep the project going at an amazing pace. I think that I don't exactly even remember the question, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll just add to that, Timothy, I think that answers the question in some way, but I'd like to more directly circle back to it. One of the things that I love about this book is I don't know if you noticed, like, I mean, you haven't seen it really, like, if you don't own a copy of it, it's pretty thick, it's a tome, so one of the things that
and shout out to Jonathan, because I think he's on the publisher
okay.
at Unlikely Books is on the call too.
One of the things I like about the project is like the number, one of the ways the title works is, and I think this was especially true for Vincent at the beginning, like, like I just want to do all of the things that I want to do and just throw them all there, so this is a book that, like, we purposely were like, let's do whatever we want, and not overthink it, and not, like, take too much out. I mean, it really wasn't about taking anything out. It was just like sort of arranging it in a way that made sense. So we really didn't cut too much. Maybe Jonathan wishes we would have.
Well, and I think Jonathan actually really helped with the final cuts.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
So thank you, Jonathan. And the other thing I would just sort of say is that it's like, in this weird world of, like, the pandemics and all this stuff and distance and moving away with friends, like that, I think that the correspondence, like, it's actually enabled us to be close even though we weren't close at all. And so, but we have this, like, kind of intimacy there. So I think that's like, we didn't want to cut too much of that either.
Is there a poem written by the other that you really wish that you wrote yourself, and which one is that?
Oh, wow. Sure, a ton. Yeah. I'd have to look at the titles, and but there's definitely more than 5. But I was, Vincent was working in a lot of, like, sort of long form stuff here and there, and I was just and actually, to go back to a previous question about our work affecting each other, like how we've seen it change. I mean, my work actually has become a lot longer since working on this project, and and sometimes I question, of course there's questions like, all right, should I cut like half of this out, but also, a lot of times I don't have that question because I feel like, I'm just working in a longer form, but I was pretty, like, impressed with some of the especially the longer poems that Vincent was able to, to really get away with everything. He was just like throwing everything into the poems, and it was just like, it was an undertaking.
Yeah, but I think to maybe preview a poem or two is that I end up having a tribute poem to Ferlinghetti that I wrote shortly before he passed, and Chris, sort of his response to that poem is he has a poem about O'Hara that is it becomes quite a nice tribute poem too. And anyway, there's that's a really nice dynamic in the thing, and so I think that we both probably there's a parallax there that's kind of interesting, and I think we're both jealous of that. But I will say, from a more personal standpoint, I think Chris really can write about his family and his wife and his daughter in such a beautiful way that I try to aspire to I sort of hide some of my personal dynamics and family dynamics. That's not part of my poetic process. And so I think there's a beautiful vulnerability and honesty and incorporating that and making that part of the work. And so, yeah, I'm trying to sprinkle that in here a little bit more in this project. So.
Now, is there a different genre that you feel that you guys could write together in short story form, screenplay? Have you tried that?
We haven't tried, no, but yeah, I don't know. Vince recently sent me something to look at. We also regard, other than working with each other, you know, when we can try to help each other out, you know, with individual projects. So I recently sent Vince a poetry project that I'm working on, and he sent me you know, more of a, I would say, like sort of creative flash nonfiction, you know, collection, which I haven't had a chance to really look too closely at, but like what I have looked at, you know, I did have that question, you know, I was like, oh, okay, like what if we tried a different approach, you know, and did something a little differently, you know, why not? We haven't even talked about that yet, but I actually did have that thought recently.
Yeah, Timothy, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think we're both really, I mean, Chris has you know, the movie My Murderer Makes books that you mentioned in his bio, you know, I would consider those like flash prose poems, sort of, but like, you know, whatever. So I mean, I would love to go full hybrid if you know, I would like to get funky with it if we do it. And so yeah, so I think we both really like flash fiction, flash prose. So I think that's an interesting form, but I think, you know, we're getting freer and freer with it. So I think we could still weave poetry in it and whatever else. So I think if it'd be fun to do something just completely hybrid and have screenplay excerpts in it and whatever else too.
Like a book length Zooey Hitsu collaboration.
All right. Well, I really thought it was great having you. And thank you so much for joining us in various stages of the world. Here is the book, Getting Away with Everything, from Vincent Cellucci and Christopher Shipman. You can get it at your favorite indie bookstore or anywhere online that you normally get stuff, but bookshop.org is a great place that supports independent bookstores as well. And look, everyone, it's on sale. And this is what you got to do. You ready? Just add it to the old cart, and there it is. So fantastic. And as you can see, there are 2 items in my cart. So fantastic. Thank you so much, guys. And hopefully we'll run into each other again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Timothy. And I look forward to the open mic. I'm going to stick around as long as I can. I have a flight out and it's considerably later in the Netherlands.
All right. So what we're going to do is say goodbye to the streaming people on Facebook, and use the link if you want to be in the open mic. Just use it now. I'll let you in. No problem if you're late for this, and obviously you're watching us. So come on in for the open. So I'll say goodnight to y'all.